overlapping quality, and we could get into a little bit of a story about it. So I'm going to run through that now. Let me know if, give me another thumbs up if you see that full screen. Is that good? All right, great. Cool. So this question was from Jim, and he asked, what's the greatest lesson you learned to be successful as an entrepreneur? And the follow-up question to this, I'm going to give an example of what I think the best lesson I've learned in the last couple of years has been. And this is the statement. I thought long and hard about this since this morning. The one thing that I think is the most important thing that I've learned is this idea: nobody cares what you can do. Everybody cares what you can do for them. And there's this great, you all should follow this guy on Twitter, Matthew Kovac. He runs social media at the New York Stock Exchange. And on the right-hand side here, he said he spent a couple of years working on a PhD to examine how people use social media. The one sentence summary of what he found was people treat social media interactions the same way they treat real life interactions. Helpful people are valued, whereas self-serving people are ignored. Pretty simple concept, but hard to stick to in practice. And the next couple slides, I'm going to try and give you an example of how to use that dynamic, use that idea to build a business. So the next question, which flows perfectly into that learning of like what the most profound lesson you can learn as an entrepreneur is this question, which is from Craig. I'm looking at launching a mentorship program targeted at creatives. Any marketing tips for this? And do you think it's okay to start before you think you've built up a big enough audience? So great question, and thought about this from a couple different angles, but I want to like break down the question and answer each of those different individual points. The first being this idea of growing an audience, and we all understand the importance of reach and the possibilities that come with the idea of reach. So this process of having an audience at size X to size Y is, the holy grail. How do I figure out how to get from small audience to big audience? And in the context of a product, it's the wrong question, in my opinion. So this process has 100 different people that can tell you how to grow your audience, tactics, blah, 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 things that you can do to catch the attention of people and expand the audience just in terms of volume and reach. But when you come to that next component, so what are you doing to get there? What is the goal, and how is that eventually going to translate into a product? How is that audience going to be prepared to consume or purchase the product that you've produced? So this is, if you're lucky, you can bring that product along later in the game. If you've been consistent enough, this is obviously representative. There's no statistics driving this, but the idea being, you just focus on the size of the audience, then you bring the product in at a later date, then the overlap is minimized. And, you could make the argument, depending on how you've built the audience, that overlap could be bigger or smaller. But I want to talk about a shift in perspective from that you can hold when you're growing that audience from scratch, that will change the way you think about this. So this is a great quote. I'll drop a link to this podcast in the Slack group after this, but the idea that this was a conversation between Mark Andreessen, who's a venture investor, and guy's name is slipping my mind at the moment, but he wrote Billions. And great quote: the idea that creativity is a collaborative exercise between the creator and the audience, and that's coming from somebody who makes TV, and a conversation between someone who makes entertainment, and a conversation between someone who invests in product. And the statement, the concept, the truth of that idea applies to whatever it is you're making. So I think in the context of creatives, this is especially true. It's finding what's happening between you and your audience is driving the development of your product and the quality of the audience that you're growing at the same time. So just to go back to that first idea, nobody cares what you can do. Everybody cares what you can do for them. So let's look at the specific question that we asked at the top here, where we're talking about growing a product that is a mentorship program for creative people. So audience is your mentees on the left, product is mentorship on the right, and the collaboration in the middle, this is what the both of you care about, right? This is on the right hand side what you're an expert at, and on the left hand side what the people that aspire to be in your position want to learn. So in building out those examples and giving them what they need to get to where you are, that's where the value lies. So this process of collaboration is happening in the middle of those two entities. So more often than not, this happens one-way traffic, right? There's the tendency for people to produce content and push a message that isn't necessarily taking into account where the audience is in their journey or how they can contribute to make that content more relevant to them. So this is a concept, I forget where I heard this, but the idea of selling your sawdust, and probably everybody listening to this is in this position. So in the context of something like a mentorship program, the thing that people are buying is obviously the product. How do we package the idea of mentorship? It could be, X number of calls, X number of resources, X number of exercises, worksheets, whatever the product ends up being. So the process of you getting to a point where you can sell that product is you making a ton of mistakes, shaving off things that don't work, shaving off things that do work. And that is where the content that draws people to the product comes from. So this whole process of creativity and honing the product is an engine for content in real time. So this is just a way to think about how, instead of building a product in silence and building an audience separately and then just trying to mash the two together at a certain point, there's this collaborative process where you're developing the product, you're helping people in real time, you're like finding out what people need and producing content that proves that you understand what people need and you've been there and you have solutions for it. And it's something that's occurring before your product's even launched. So the idea being, you're essentially just sharing the things you're already doing, and as you're sharing those things, you're getting to the point where the product kind of is taking shape itself, and all the while you're building relationships with people, you're giving away a ton of value, and you're producing content as a byproduct of developing your product and honing your skills. So it's just a different way to think about the process of developing a product. And what occurred to me just as I was building this slide deck is it becomes about proof of work, especially in the service industry. People and creative people, this applies to more than most. People just want to know that you're capable of the thing that you're selling. And I think it sounds incredibly obvious. It sounds like, yeah, of course people want to know you're competent. But the problem I think most people run into, or the blind spot that a lot of us have, is when we're doing marketing or we're talking to an audience, we sort of tend to jump a few too many stages past what we're actually doing. We don't showcase the work that we're doing. We don't figure out ways to use our competency and the things that we're working on every day to build that audience. And that's just, wasted energy at a certain point. So what we want to do is try and align the two as closely as possible. So the work that we're producing for our paying clients, and even the mentorship that we're, as opposed to you spending a couple of weeks building marketing material for a mentorship program, there's a more efficient way to do that, where you could just mentor someone for 2 weeks and use that to produce content to sell the program. Does that make sense? So this idea then graduates to come for the sawdust, stay for the membership, build it once, sell it twice. So you have this process, you're undergoing this process where you're exposing what you're doing in real time. You're showcasing your ability. You're helping people out in real time, but you're also moving the product along with that during that process. So a different way to visualize this is, you know, as opposed to moving from that small audience to large audience, you could start with an audience of one. This could be the person that you are helping get from where you were to where you are. And that audience or that process of working with that person will produce interactions, content, questions, just so many jump off points that you can use to create material that's going to resonate with more people that are in that situation. So as you building out from that audience of one is far more useful than, you know, spraying and praying, growing a huge audience of people that might be generally interested in entrepreneurship or marketing or whatever else hashtag buzzword exists out there. It's like, let's really figure out what the process is, where we're going to take someone from and to. Do that at a one-to-one level. And, you know, if you're doing this for the first time, maybe even do this, you know, complementary with someone who you really want to work with or who really wants to work with you. And you both benefit massively from it. You get an enormous amount of social proof, you get a huge amount of content, and you get to refine the product in real time. So all of the energy you would have spent on one-way broadcasted marketing material could just be redirected towards actually generating a result for someone and recording that process and turning that into this compounding proof. So proof is this like nuanced difference, I think, in a lot of people's marketing. The ability to prove that you can do something is far more, you know, it just resonates far more than, you know, even writing very compelling copy or coming up with a different angle to pitch something. Just especially with something like mentorship or, you know, products that are improving people, the things that move the needle are, you know, have you done this for someone before? What do they say about it? So then we graduate to product, and that starts to resonate with more and more people. As you take more people through the process, you get more social proof, and again, this becomes a flywheel. So the mechanics of that, or the components that produce that or make up that flywheel, if we're talking about that idea of sawdust on the left-hand side, it's, you know, all the content you produce, all the things that we're afforded as citizens of the internet, articles, email lists, YouTube video, audio, images, case studies of things that you've done, social proof, and just behind the scenes of your process. And essentially there's like the gap that we're trying to leap here is trust. So someone sees, you know, oh, Craig's given away so much about his process. There got to be an enormous amount of value sitting behind the paywall of the product that he has to sell. So we're giving away a ton on the front end, and this is what we're calling sawdust. But on the back end, it's essentially just a, you know, more refined, more compiled, or even, you know, there's a different value add on the back. It could be the same content with a community added to it, whatever it might be. I know a few of you guys have community products that's another way to, you know, add value to a curriculum and like make someone commit to a purchase as opposed to just consuming it organically. But I'm getting a little bit off track. So the idea of the transference of trust is you know, moving from content to a sale, which is a product or a service, and this becomes a loop. So as you're producing the sawdust, as you're working on projects, helping people get to different stages, you're proving the efficacy of the solution. So you're either, if you're talking about a product like a course or a mentorship, it's, you know, the compounding value of people connecting in the community, people landing their first client, people, you know, understanding how to better structure a scope of work, whatever you are selling, like this loop continues to reinforce itself. So we're using the byproduct of the energy you put in to increase the flywheel as it works. So proof of work is a super important mechanism here. And I think as a marketing device is the most overlooked, but the easiest to figure out. You don't have to over-engineer proof of work. You just help someone do something and then ask them how it was. And in that process, you get a ton of material to help someone else go through that process. So we tend to abstract it a bit too much sometimes, and it doesn't really need to be more. Dead pixel I just discovered on my screen here. All right, so some real life examples there. I'm sure you guys in the design community know who Chris Do is. And essentially what he's doing is, you know, the perfect version of this model. He's been a designer, done the work, been in all of the meetings that he is now compressing into new assets, right? Like, how do you identify a client from hell? People trust his course because he's gone through that process with X number of clients and he's referring to it in the stories that he's telling. So he's building authority through proof of work. Instagram questions is another mechanism, and I've used a little bit of that myself. The idea that you get input from the community, you ask for what they're struggling with, use that as proof of work that you can answer those questions. You're familiar with where they are and what they're struggling with. And, you know, eventually that mass of content and authority and proof of work becomes this sales asset. So I'm not sure if I made it abundantly clear earlier in the document, but I think the process of building the audience kind of begins here. We don't like build the audience to then drop this on them. It's your evolution becomes, you kind of take people on that journey with you. And as your product evolves, you just cycle more people into it. So another example I'm quite familiar with is something that I've been building for a while. So the idea of Sawdust that exists in the visualized value ecosystem is, you know, all of the front end social media content that's, you know, not necessarily going to land anybody as a $10,000 a month retainer client, but it is going to get people eventually into the daily manifest community. And if they're consuming all of these principles and this stuff resonates with them, then, you know, there's more of a chance that they're going to come into the consumer side, the front end of the paid products. And then on the, you know, more the B2B side of visualized value is this consulting offer where occasionally, you know, someone who is, you know, running a money management company or a mortgage like a mortgage platform, a guy I spoke to today, people who are just in the business of communicating abstract things, they kind of hook onto some of this stuff and move them down the funnel from this proof of work, the ability to visualize an idea that is complex. Every day they're getting hit with that proof of work. Okay, I understand what you're all about. This is consistently what I see here. If I engage this person, if I talk to this person, this is what I can expect them to offer me. So proof of work in all of its different forms is, you know, whatever you are good at creating and enjoy creating, and you can fuel that flywheel with. One of the things to avoid is to, you know, commit to a format that you can't produce consistently, because then, you know, you don't get the flywheel effect. You just you don't benefit from that compounding process of somebody seeing you frequently producing something that answers a similar question and takes them to a similar place. So another distinction here is pieces and parts. So on the bottom of this slide, the idea that you're building basically you're kind of externalizing all of your expertise and categorizing them in ways that and this is specific to an education product, but if you imagine a textbook, you're kind of flicking open to one page and you're making an asset that it speaks specifically to a concept on that one page, or a specific experience that you've had, that there's a lesson embedded in that. And this is the stuff that you're posting organically and is just gradually kind of gradually building a relationship with people, but that doesn't have to exist separately from the course itself. So and this is again very specific to a mentorship program, like these pieces can all inform the curriculum that you're building. So you're getting that feedback from the audience in real time. This going back to this idea of collaboration between audience and what's the word? Audience and product. So your product is evolving in kind of in lockstep with what's resonating with your audience. And you start with something that isn't a hard sell necessarily. There's a way for you to, community is a great example of that. You have a very simple, low barrier to entry asset that you can start to use to get the right people around you, and you develop that that's that more comprehensive asset, either, like I said before, with somebody from the community that just you essentially work one-on-one with them to take them through this curriculum. And then you have this just enormous amount of social proof to then package that system and sell it. Does it make sense? Cool. Hopefully you followed that sequence. If anyone wants to ask a question, drop it in the chat and I'll try and figure out how to unmute whoever, or we can do text-based. Just let me know. Hope everybody is doing all right, given these wild times we're living in. No questions? All right. Hopefully that means it made sense, or it might mean it made no sense whatsoever. Oh, hang on. All right. What do I think of Chris Doe's strategy? I mean, I don't know what the numbers are on the back end of that. It's not it's definitely not definitely doesn't resonate with me, just in terms of I guess the sophistication of some of the material. Yeah, but as far as I know, those guys are doing really well with like entry level designers, and I think that's probably the market that they're going after. So yeah, I haven't honestly not consumed enough material to have an opinion either way, but the social strategy is remarkable. It works. Matt, you type in a question, is that? Okay, Matt asked, how do you recommend getting started visualizing our value proposition and products like you do for clients? Our angle is strong but lacks some consistency of messaging. Good question. I think I'll probably do a one-off video, presentation on this and go into more detail with it. But I think one of the most sort of profound mechanics in that process of visualizing is just think about before and after in all the different areas, or all the different benefits of your product. So this is generally a universal quality, at least of a service business, is like people are used to working with your competition, who are disorganized and don't look at the whole problem and blah 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 blah, which can be visually represented as a mess in most cases. And then we are systematic, organized, linear. Jim's on this call. I think he's got a great way to pitch the idea of visualizing your value proposition, especially like when you are dealing with clients that, or when you're dealing with clients that typically don't follow the process. If you have this thing visualized, then you can kind of point to the visual in the same way that you point to a sign in a bar that says no shoes, no shirt, no service. The idea of having that process visualized out is a way to ensure that everybody's bought in the early stages. But the couple things are the transformation from state A to state B. I think most people, whatever you do, you can come up with 3 or 4 high level transformations that you can then think about how to visualize those transformations. There's I can show a couple of examples. I thought I could. So here's an example. So this is a supply chain company, and essentially they deal with problems like many of their clients have such a complex business and so many different touch points that they hire a consultant for this, a consultant for that, a vendor for this, a vendor for that, and it just turns into this insane mess of like lack of communication, lack of transparency, blah 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 blah. So this idea of transitioning from the old way to the new way is something that we found like pretty much in every client that we work with. There's a way to visualize that, and there is, if you have a product that has market value, then you are doing something differently than a lot of other people in the market. So hopefully that's helpful as a way to start to think about what the transitions are that you want to visualize. And then you can, I think even if you have those things figured out, then you can hire great like visual thinkers to portray them, but you want to just like crystallize what the concept is that you're changing from position X to position Y. This is another example of like depth of expertise. So here's how the market operates. They are, this shallow, they sell X, Y, and Z, these very basic service lists. And then we are X amount more qualified because we have this depth of service within like our in-house capabilities far exceed the rest of the market. I think if there's anything else in here. Yeah. Great. So yeah, I think there's a bunch of other examples I could show. But what I'll do is next week I could do more of like a fundamentals on that idea, because some of the thinking is still in my head. There are a couple of examples I have. This is a little older. It's a little older. There's a video. This might have been the video that you watched, Matt, with this deck. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But this is essentially how we pitch the idea of visualized value is, the sell is you have your ability to deliver a result is the most valuable asset that you have. And you have this huge vulnerability because you're not able to tell that story in a compelling way. And what's happening is this breakdown in what you see and what your prospect sees. So I think there's honestly not that many visual mechanics to portray these different scenarios. There really is just like organized, disorganized, like transparent, opaque. There's some just like the idea of a business that operates with integrity. There are visual metaphors to describe bad businesses and good businesses. And that's essentially what we're doing. Yeah, Craig, I will unmute you now. So Craig says he's implemented a new sales deck that visualizes their process much more, and the results have been excellent. So here he comes.
Hi, Jack. How are you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. So, based on some of the things that you've been saying, visualizing value and things like that. So, I run a digital agency. So, we do branding and digital, mainly web and apps and stuff like that. Um, Previous to kind of visualizing what we do in a slide deck, so we started putting our values up front, promises in there, our process and things like that, much like what you've just shown. Previous to doing that, we were probably looking at maybe projects, web projects, maybe within £5,000-10,000 or something in that range. We're really close to just landing probably a project that's around 80 to 90 grand, 80 to 90,000 quid.
Magnificent.
Purely based on changing our slide deck to be more about our values and visualizing them, showing our process. It's amazing the change.
Yeah.
And when you start to do that.
That is superb, man. Yeah, it's definitely, I think the process or the ability to sort of transfer belief and just have people follow the story and just feel like they get it as much as you do is like so confidence inspiring that it just changes the market that you're playing in entirely.
Oh yeah, totally. The other thing as well was changing how I did Twitter. So taking Twitter more seriously and actually kind of putting my values over on Twitter, writing good content. They actually came from Twitter. So this particular lead came from Twitter, saw my tweets, already kind of knew me, lives probably within a 20-mile radius of where I am. So he's quite a local client.
Yeah.
Saw all my tweets, liked what we did, arranged a sales call, and that were it.
That's awesome.
So because everything matched up, whereas it didn't before, because everything from tweets through to exactly what you do with visualize value, because everything matched up, it just worked straight away.
Yeah, you start to realize that compounding benefit then, right? It's like the presence in somebody's mind just amplifies that much more because you're talking the same language every time they encounter your name, your brand, like the ideas just continue to resonate. It's great.
Yeah.
What specifically, so you were sort of taking the process and the language that you developed for the agency and just pushing that onto how you like communicate on Twitter. I think people will probably find value in how you went through that process.
The Twitter stuff kind of started first. So I made the decision at the beginning of this year, New Year's resolutions and all that, to take social media either seriously or just get off it.
Right.
So just not use it anymore. I didn't find any value in it. So I thought, I'm going to try and take one of them seriously. So I thought Twitter's my preferred one. So I thought, right, I'm going to look at Twitter, see how I can actually take it seriously, look at a few courses, see what a couple of people are doing. Ed Latimore particularly is someone who I've followed on Twitter for a very long time. And I've always been curious to his kind of model and the way that he works. Ed Latimore's model is pretty straightforward. It's just writing really good content that gets shared and then interacting with people. So that's kind of the process that I followed. Started using an app called Hype Fury, which is brilliant.
Oh, really? Okay. I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, Hype Fury is a little bit like Buffer sort of thing. It's a tweet scheduler, but it's specifically for Twitter. I think it starts at about $13 a month or something. But the way it works is totally designed for Twitter, and it's got some really cool features in it as well, like ability to schedule threads.
Cool.
You can set up a bunch of evergreen tweets as well that it automatically retweets. So yeah, it's really cool. So I basically just started tweeting about kind of design, branding, creative stuff, a little bit about self-improvement as well. I already enjoy writing, so I didn't find it too difficult to do that kind of stuff. But all I was kind of doing was just tweeting my values.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I came around to redoing all our sales deck, making it much more visual, I kind of implemented unconsciously, really, implemented all those unconscious values in there too. And then they just kind of all linked together. It wasn't really a formal process,
Right.
not like the whole visualized value thing. But then I've kind of realized that they do link up after the fact.
Yeah, it's like you're building this sort of mental scaffolding, I think, in your mind by going through the process, visually articulating like how you're, how you've built your business is like it's like externalizing the way you think and, making your values into something that can provide a service. So it makes total sense that once you've started to structure that and think about that visually, that you have like different, different like mental buckets for how to talk about it. I've found that to be the case with visualized value for sure. When there's as soon as you start to define those things, you can really go down a rabbit hole and like get a lot of juice out of each of the ideas and the things that are driving the business. Like the idea of visual communication being that much more compelling of a medium for some people. You could talk about that. You could have 10 lifetimes and never run out of things to say,
The kind of stupid thing about all this is that we've been running a digital agency for nearly 10 years, and I've avoided putting all this kind of stuff in anything that we've done before.
Yeah.
Because you always have this idea, don't you, that you don't want to bring in too much of, well, I always did anyway, controversial topics in what you're doing.
Right.
And so this is not even really controversial, sharing kind of self-improvement stuff and things like that. But you don't want to basically produce anything that's going to put any potential client off.
Right.
And now I've realized that, that's stupid.
Yeah. If I could make a cultural observation, Craig, it's a little bit more of an edgy thing to do in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, that's true.
So I've sort of gone through that transformation myself as well. It's just sharing what's working for you, what you're learning, and the stuff that has genuinely resonated with you as you like work on yourself. I find that tends to be the stuff that really resonates with other people, because it's just, people are experiencing that as well as you are, but they're just not articulating it. So it's gonna hit home.
Yeah, it's all good stuff.
Identity marketing. Thanks for sharing, Craig. That is cool, man. Congratulations and good luck with that signing that project. It's good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for everything you do as well. This is awesome.
Glad you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I'm still we're figuring out the process as we go. We've made a massive technical jump this week. Didn't have to pause every 90 seconds to let people in. So we're moving in the right direction. All right. Anyone else got any questions, or we can gift 20 minutes back? Good. Going once. Thanks everyone for coming on. Appreciate it. It's probably very late in some parts of the world, so thanks for your time. And hopefully see you next week. Thanks for being involved. Thanks for contributing, and keep doing what you're doing. Especially in these times, keep inspiring. Cheers, guys. Thank you very much.